This conference will now be recorded.
All right, so thank everybody for coming today. This is our second webinar in our new series that we started with our early career development group. And today our topic is going to be on the diversification of research portfolio in early career stages using large data sets. And so we're very happy to have two presenters today that are going to split the time. Dr. James Graham is the director of the Center of Community Partnerships and a professor in occupational therapy in the College of Health and Human Sciences at Colorado State University. Dr. Amol, Karmarkar, say it for me.
Karmarkar.
Thank you. Is an associate professor in the Division of Rehabilitation Science at UTMB. So they are going to speak with us, and then we'll have a time for questions at the end. If everyone who is not the main speaker can mute your line so that we don't have any background noise. And then at the end, we'll open up for questions and answers. So thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Graham to start us off.
Oh, okay. Thanks, Brooks. And thank everybody for joining us here this morning. So yes, as she said, that Amol and I are at our different respective institutions. You can see I got him ghosted out, but don't worry, about halfway through he gets his it's not working. So we'll switch over to that. So we just kind of want to start off with kind of, why are we even talking about this? Why would you get involved with secondary analysis? And then just a little bit what Amol will hit on, if you are so inspired, how would you start that? So as Brooks said, so Amol's down at UTMB and I'm at Colorado State, but we're actually representing the Center for Large Data Research and Data Sharing and Rehab. So that's the CLDR, and it's housed there at UTMB. Ken Ottenbacher is the PI for that, but it's a consortium between, again, UTMB, Colorado State, Cornell University, and then two institutes, departments at University of Michigan, the ICPSR and the medical school. So the background for this, so we've had this grant for about 9 years, I guess, but it's an infrastructure grant, so it's a large center grant, and not to increase the research infrastructure at our respective institutions, but to increase capacity in the field. So I'm not going to read that's our little mission statement there. But if you think about where this came from, a little diagram down there helps a little bit. And so it's kind of the AAA. I know that's probably copyrighted, but we're using it anyway. So it has to deal with accessing data, finding secondary data sources and actually getting access to them, analyzing. Again, a lot of these things, I'll hit on this a little bit, have unique kind of methods. And there is archiving. Did somebody ask a question? Okay, and so those are all different kind of components that we provide services for, trainings on, and everything else in terms of this kind of new field. And so real quick, the CLDR is actually part of a larger network. It's called the MR3 network, the Medical Rehabilitation Research Resource. And so there are several days, I know, I'm not sure, obviously we don't know everybody's interests out there, but there's different centers focusing on different aspects of rehab related research, and they're listed there, so I'm not going to read through those, but so we're one of 6 centers around the country doing this. But we all kind of have the same goal, and that is to increase capacity. As you can see, the services offered down there are consistent across the different centers, and it's an easy website to find. You can see it's just ncmrr.org. So if you are interested in simulation, clinical trials, what's the NM for, the brain stimulation, regenerative medicine, or if you're the kind of person taking your invention to market, then the TREAT Center up in New Hampshire there. So it really is a broad spectrum for the field, and it's funded primarily by NCMMR, but a couple other institutes as well. But in terms of our particular center, so these are the 5 kind of domains of supports and services we provide. Obviously, the first one is education and training, such as this, but we also do workshops. We just did one up at ICPSR last week, and we do pre-conference symposium and all sorts of different training. Amol's going to cover the data directory. That's kind of the first place to stop and shop if you are looking for data that fits into your research program. We have a couple different types of pilot projects. I won't get into that now, but if you'll see the website there at the end if you're interested in that. pretty self-explanatory. We also do some visiting scholars where someone has something they're working on or need help with one thing or another. It's just kind of a temporary collaboration with someone in the consortium. And then lastly, kind of the newest road we've gone down is the data archiving. That's helping investigators that have been collecting data and have been completed research projects, how they make that publicly accessible meet both the mandate, but also just to expand the impact of that original research. So why are we doing all this? Well, a lot has changed over the last 10 years, and there's two kind of things driving it that we're going to hit on today. And one was the kind of the mandate from the White House Office on Science and Technology Policy that said federal agencies funding more than $100 million, so basically the NIH, NIDLR, AHRQ, that they need to come up with a plan to make that, they said results, but they meant data, available to the public. Essentially, public funds paid for this research, so you don't just have to share the manuscripts anymore. You don't not make them public available, but the data need to be available eventually to others to analyze. Then the next thing is just how the world has changed, just technological advances in terms of what data are available, how operational it is, how shareable it is, and so these two things have just created a data surplus, and a lot of us weren't really trained on what to do that if it wasn't a nice clean study. So first thing I'll talk about is the sharing of research data, and so that hasn't been an easy road. It's obviously people are somewhat, we just say not ownership, but you design a study, you get funding, you spend 5 years collecting data and analyzing the data, and then you have to turn around and share it. And so it hasn't been an easy road, but it has changed dramatically in the last couple of years specifically. And I just put on here examples of other recent kind of paradigm shifts that, if you think about where patient-reported outcomes were 10, 12 years ago, it's like subjective feelings, and people were like, you need objective data to demonstrate effect. Same with secondary analysis. When you used to say you're doing that, you're just fishing. Well, now it's called data science, because you're looking through, you're mining through terabytes of data to find a specific thing, but it's now socially acceptable. And then the last example I got there is qualitative research. That was soft science, pseudoscience, and now that's a gold standard. It's pretty much any major grant you want to go into, you better have a kind of a mixed methods approach for a comprehensive look. And so what I'm getting at is that this kind of data sharing and the reusing research data is just kind of, that's next up in my opinion in terms of paradigm shifts. And of course the mandate helped. And so let's say I borrowed this slide from Allison Cernich presented at the Health Data Palooza, but so again, the mandate came out in 2013, but it's just like anything else from the government. They say thou shalt do this, but they don't give you the details. And so the Cures Act kind of reinforced or more explicitly laid out how this should work, at least at NIH. And again, like I said before, the same thing applies to AHRQ or NIDLR or any of the other national or federal funding agencies. And I've seen some of this. I haven't actually had to do this yet, but I thought this was pretty interesting. So from diabetes, is that now you pretty much have to explain in your method section, not just in the appendix, in your method section, how you're going to make the analytical file for this particular study available for others to, if nothing else, to double check your work, but also to maybe do something else. So even if it's, I guess you wouldn't have too much unfunded research going to diabetes, the Journal of Diabetes, but I'm just saying that the rules have changed enough that willingly or reluctantly, data must be shared. And so that is what it is, but that just means also for the user side, there's a lot more data available and a lot more opportunities to take advantage of those opportunities. So I listed a few of them out here. I don't need to spend any time on it. If you're on this call, you probably know the benefits. And so part of it is making, like Amol, I've done this. I mean, you can get access to data outside of your field that you normally wouldn't be collaborating on, but you can bring a perspective that then again they didn't have on their team. And you can look at old study. I mean, just think about how much statistics have changed over the last few years. Is that you can look at some of the historical studies and run it using the more appropriate, if not sophisticated, techniques. And everything from merging small trials into a larger, a real kind of a what's it called, meta-analysis, but with the real data or patient level data, and then on and on. But so it's nobody can argue about the benefits of it. It's just simply the willingness of it has been the challenge. So that's from the research side. Again, it's vetted data. It was collected for research purposes. You get your hands on it. It's pretty much, once you get the background, you can hit the ground running on that. On the other side, more the observational side and the non-research data that again has exploded over the past few years. This again is great opportunities. This just has a lot of cautions and caveat with it. And so if you think about what somebody, and this is obviously not an exhaustive list, but you think about electronic health records now, with the I always forget the name of it because it doesn't make sense. Meaningful use initiatives that's I don't know what the percent is, but it's ubiquitous, and you can get access to those things, but it's not easy to analyze. And then you think about even if clinical trials or just you think about social media, but the wearable devices, your smartphone, all these different physiological measures that can be captured, and then but it's just data overload. I'm not going to talk about the rest of that, but it's also the ability to link files. So you have some patient level data, and you have basic geographic area, whatever, you can add on, link in either census files or the area resource file to really add some complexity and meaning to your analyses. And so a lot of that used to be a monumental effort. Now it's quite simple. And so the cautionary tale I have with that is that there are new rules with this. And again, this is what I was saying, is that most of it that have been out a while weren't trained with these techniques. And I think it is getting better now with training programs, and if nothing else, if post professional or post degree training opportunities. I'll show you some of those here in a minute. But these are just kind of the list of some of the types, I guess, of studies you can do, and it's the kind of stuff that we help people do through the center. And so to me, that what it comes down to is why not use both of these? And so the problem with randomized clinical trials is the external validity, right? It's clean. You understand that the effect was this by this treatment, but your patient population or your participants weren't represented in that sample. So how does that work? On the other side, when we have the observational studies with the selection bias and all that other stuff, is that we have there's concerns about the internal validity. But in theory, if not practice, you'd think that these observational studies could inform clinical trials, and vice versa. Okay, here's a clinical trial, now let's do more of an observational real world study to see if it does again apply to the real world. So it's kind of everybody is usually in one camp or the other, but I'm suggesting you kind of if you are more trained in the clinical trials and have access to data like that you may be able to replicate or extend that study with other external data. So with that, one last thing is that you shouldn't be intimidated. This is, it's happening anyway, and there are resources available, but it's the same thing with what happened with translational research 15 years ago or patient-centered outcomes research 10, 12 years ago. There weren't people with degrees in translational research when the NIH roadmap came out and outlined that. But now there are centers of excellence for translational research. There are people who are experts in that. And same with PCOR. There weren't patient-centered outcomes graduate programs just idling away, nobody in those until the ACA was passed and said, and funded PCORI. These are all kind of opportunities seized by people who saw that. And I'm thinking it has already started, but I think that is occurring now with kind of the big data and kind of the archiving and secondary analysis. So Amol is going to talk more about some of the repositories and where you can find that, but in terms of just methodological training and kind of understanding the language to start with, I have 5 little different resources here that you can do. So like I said, we were just at ICPSR, but they have a really comprehensive summer program for research methodology. And obviously, you're probably all familiar with Academy Health, everything from the pre-conference symposium to webinars and everything else, and same with VIRIC. And I actually went to DATIC way back when. That's at the University of Connecticut, but they still have a great summer program as well. I know less about iSpore, but I've heard from several people that is the Mecca. That's where you want to go if you truly want to get down to how you would do secondary analysis with existing data. So I'm assuming we should Brooks or however you pass it off, you want to turn it over to Amol, and I'll yammer on for a second.
Yep, I can do that.
Thanks. So I guess if there's any quick questions right now for me, or we can hold off until Amol is done. Like I said, he's going to kind of show you how to get started and where to find data and what the next steps would be. But if there's anything that I either said quickly, which I do, or if you just need clarification, we can do that while she's switching.
And Amol, you should be the presenter now. There we go.
So can you guys see my slides and everything?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Okay. Good morning, everyone. So I think, I'm just going to kind of present the second part of this webinar, which is like, how do I begin? And I think I just want to kind of reiterate the fact that Dr. Graham mentioned that, which is, the title of this presentation is, it's all about diversification of research portfolio. And I think, one point that he raised is kind of, even though some of you may be like doing the experimental studies or qualitative research, I think the tools and the training and the resources that are available and some of the thing our center has been doing. I think those are great resources in early career stages, and you should really take advantage of the existing data and some of the training, in terms of like kind of generating some of the publication, or also maybe using some of this information, as a preliminary data for other proposal you're working on. So I think, that's why we kind of, decided to pick this title, because, not everyone is kind of doing the observational studies or studies using large data, but we just wanted to show that even though you are kind of, doing more RCTs or experimental studies, how can you use these resources, some of which our center has been putting together for last 10 years. So I'll be talking about, just talking about a couple of those resources that we actually put together. And, as I said, these are constantly evolving. That means we are working on these tools and resources as we speak, as well as, there are plans to kind of also develop new tools as we go along. So as I said, I'll be talking about two different things that we develop as part of the center. One relates to more like a data access issue. So again, if you really go back 2010, that's when we started, the center was started. Our biggest hurdle was kind of, the access, like where you can find this information. I think, there are like a lot of sites available, like CDC has a bunch of publicly available data. HRQ now has several of the dashboards. But again, this information was really scattered. And, again, not many people would know actually where to find the the data sets, and the data sets that are pertinent for rehabilitation as well as the disability type of research. So that was our kind of key criteria behind developing this resource. And the second thing, when the center got refunded second round, there was just a lot of emphasis, as James mentioned, about the data sharing and kind of reusing the data for other research purposes. And so basically we kind of shifted, or we kind of also diversify the focus of our center, and then added the data repository and kind of the archiving process. So I'll be talking about another tool that we developed with the ICPSR folks at Michigan. So the first tool, which is the rehabilitation data directory, was developed along with Cornell University. So they are one of the consortium partners. And if you're familiar with their work, they are pioneer in disability statistics, and they have a really useful and website that is available, which is called as disabilitystatistics.org. And it has a lot of information regarding employment, regarding some of the existing surveys that are out there, such as American Community Survey or Current Population Surveys. So we decided to kind of embed the tool that we were developing as part of the large data center in their website, because again, there is a great visibility for the disability statistics, and that's what we did. So if you look at the right hand corner, so those are the three kind of things that we started to put together in 2010. And as I said, these are kind of a constantly evolving tool. That means we are adding new information, we are updating information to the existing data sets, and some of the changes that these data sets are undergoing. So basically, this is the kind of the front page of the rehabilitation dataset directory. As I said, I mean, the whole purpose behind developing this directory was to kind of make research community aware of the data sets that are relevant to disability as well as rehabilitation research. So basically, just like putting all that information onto one page, rather than an individual person has to kind of look for that information everywhere. And so basically the way we developed this is we did a lot of user testing in terms of making sure there is a usability for a tool like this. And then after doing that, we decided that it's better to kind of develop this tool considering three different set of researcher. I mean, the one set is kind of someone who is just exploring, what are the data sets that are available. So if you look at the left side, you have bunch of criteria. So if someone is really just want to explore what are the data sets that are available for a certain health condition or particular disability measure, they can just kind of use the filter by criteria option, and then kind of get to the results. There's a second set of researcher that we thought that were someone who knows a particular data set. So for example, someone knows about the the national, the behavioral, the BRFAS, the behavioral risk factor surveillance system, the data set that get released and published by the CDC. But again, they don't know again where to find that information. So that's the second set. And the third set, which is basically that's why we kind of embedded the search option, is again someone who have a general idea, basically, and I just provided an example of spinal cord injury. Somebody is interested in finding data sets that are relevant to that particular condition, and then once they put the search term in there and click submit, then basically the directory is providing the relevant data set which has those conditions. I mean, one thing, and then basically the next slide just shows. I mean, I'm just pulling one example that comes out when you put the spinal cord injury in the search tool. And so basically the data set that we are talking about is the spinal cord injury rehab data set, or the SCR rehab. And then what we do is we just kind of provide the summary, some of the key terms, what type of the study design, the original study design it was, the name of the funding agencies, and as I said, just kind of some of the topics. So like, if you really look at the outcomes, like, what the data set has, and what type of information that is available. We also provide, some of the technical reports if it's out there, which includes like your code book, data documentation, and things like that, as well as, where the data is kind of archived. And then I'll kind of show you like the other tool that we developed along with the ICPSR, and that's kind of our data archiving tool. So basically, the primary website that's where the archive data is available for download and for other secondary analysis purposes. I think one of the feature that has been widely used in our dataset directory is called as the Ask a Researcher, and basically this is kind of a help desk for our tool. It's like, somebody has a question related to a data set, or kind of, wanting to know if there are data sets that exist, regarding a particular condition. So they basically kind of register, and then they send us a question. And then basically the email comes to us as well as to Cornell, and then we respond within like 48 hours. And as I said, that option or that tool has been used very widely, where we get some really good queries, and then some good questions, and that generates a lot of discussion and kind of follow-up conversation with researcher, all across US and also internationally. And so basically this is the so just going back, and if you look at the primary website, as I said, like, that's where the data is archived, and then if you click that, it basically takes you to the other tool that I'll be talking about, and which is the data repository that we develop along with ICPSR at University of Michigan. And this is kind of just showing like the structure of the data set, what type of files are available, and then kind of the data documentation and things like that. I mean, the other some really good information is you have all the information, like how do you make sure you provide proper citation, and then there are also some relevant publication, again, if you want to read what other people have done using this particular data, some of the relevant publications also available in there. So I think as James mentioned, I mean, there is just a massive explosion in terms of all these repositories that are available. So this is kind of outdated. I mean, probably a couple of years back, but last month when I checked this website, there were about 2,500 data repositories that were listed here. So it's just a lot of information, and then again, it's like how many of these data repositories are really good, what quality of information exists out there, and then again, all those things and all those questions we don't know yet. This is kind of just a screenshot of some of the data repositories that are supported by the NIH, and as I said, this information also gets updated on a monthly basis, where you can just download this report, and it just provides you information regarding what type of data repository are available or supported by the NIH, and then how you can submit the data. So the data submission policy kind of gives you some information regarding that. And this is the Excel spreadsheet that I was talking, which gets updated on a monthly basis. And so basically the tool that we have developed along with ICPSR, again, it's funded by our center and the NIH, which is called as the Archive of Data on Disability to Enable Policy, or ADEPT. So that is listed under that the list of NIH data repository now. And this is again just kind of the ICPSR, and I'll kind of explain a little bit about the ADEPT tool that we have developed. But ICPSR has just a ton of data repositories, and the way they kind of classify it, it's by the they call it like a topical archive. So basically, there are data sets that are archived related to education, and a lot of things which I'm listing there. So this is the tool that we developed. It's called as the ADEPT, or the Archive of Data on Disability to Enable Policy and Research. So basically, we started this initiative as part of our renewal of our center. And as I said, during the first round, the whole purpose of our center was the awareness, right? I mean, just providing information to folks regarding what are the data sets that are available. And then comes the second round, we actually expanded that focus and added the archiving portion. And as part of that initiative, we developed this tool along with ICPSR. And basically, this is one of the data repository that exists out there. And again, we've been archiving data sets on this data repositories. And there are some other initiatives that the center is doing, as Dr. Graham mentioned, is some of the pilot funding opportunities and things like that, which is basically just providing resources to individuals in regards to both, helping them to archive the data, as well as kind of, this initiative where we are supporting graduate students as well as postdoc to kind of, support their work using one of the archived data sets where they can go and present their work at the ACRM annual meeting. So you will see probably a series of presentation at this year's meeting where some of the students as well as postdoc, they have used one of the archived data set, and they will be presenting their work at the conference. So basically what we are doing through these tools is, one is kind of, raising the awareness. A second thing is kind of, again, developing capacity. And I think, as I mentioned, graduate student and postdoc is kind of a great group to do that, because, they are looking for some new ideas and kind of, looking for some new projects. And we just feel like tools like this is a great resource for early career folks, as well as, the graduate students and postdoc, in terms of diversifying their skills and kind of, learning new things. Other thing which ICPSR also has, and if some of you have kind of look into the NIDLR funding opportunities recently, you may have seen the Open ICPSR in there. And basically, what is Open ICPSR is pretty similar to a lot of the other data repositories that I have mentioned before, where basically you can just upload the data, and the data set doesn't go through the curation or the other process that it goes through when basically somebody is trying to upload it through the ADEPT portal. But again, Open ICPSR, that's the other option is available. I guess very quickly, the other tool that we have on which is again hosted on the disabilitystatistics.org, it's something called as the Cross Dataset Variable Catalog. And I think, the whole purpose of developing this tool, which again, going back to Dr. Graham's point, where he said that I mean, I think meta-analysis was like a very popular method for many years, because I think, the whole premise of, doing something like that was really great, where I think, basically you have multiple small studies, and then how do you basically build an evidence towards a particular thing. However, I think more and more what we are seeing is the concept of common data element, where I think a lot of these publicly available data sets are making sure that the individual data elements are common, and that way, if a researcher wants to really kind of harmonize all the individual level data, just so that the sample size is larger, and then the evidence will be much more. I mean, again, there are possibilities like that. So along the same line, what we have done a few years back is develop this cross data set variable catalog. And as you can see, basically the purpose is what exactly I mentioned before, is where maybe the individual study may be like a small sample size, but how you can kind of compile all that individual or patient level data. That way, again, you still have the patient level data, but now your sample size is 1,000 as compared to just maybe 200 if you are just focusing on one individual study. So we focus on these 6 different data sets, and again, as I said, as part of development of this tool, what we have done is we identify these common data elements and look at how they are being measured, and then if somebody can really compile all this data for their research purposes. I guess I mean, a couple of things that we just wanted to bring up, especially with large data set, or especially the health services research. I mean, I think this is like an exciting time, as well as it's kind of confusing, because there are just a lot of things that change with policies and reimbursement and all that thing. So I think this is kind of a cautionary tale that we just wanted to bring up as we wrap up the presentation, where I think there are, as I said, just a lot of extrinsic factors. So if you are really looking into doing like more policy-based research or health services research, you have to really pay very close attention to some of these changes that happen constantly. But I think the more important thing is it's also the intrinsic factors. So like as I said, most of us get training as part of the doctoral studies, doing experimental studies, and I was certainly like that. I mean, my doctoral training was heavy on doing experimental studies and RCTs and things like that. And I think it's kind of a role reversal, where that's what we really need to think about when switching to observational studies, or studies using secondary data. But what I mean is, in experimental studies, as a researcher, we actually manipulate the intervention, or we kind of randomly assign individuals, and then we observe the outcome. As compared to the observational studies, where there are just a lot of natural experiments that are happening, whether it's policy related, reimbursement related, and then what we do as a researcher is we observe those, we observe the effect or impact of those natural experiments and conduct our research. And as I mentioned before, one has to be really careful about all these changes that are happening. I think the bigger problem is again, not kind of approaching this with a robust research question or a good study design, which is also true for experimental study. I mean, a lot of times, which I used to think that I mean, the data is there and you can basically do something with it and then kind of produce results and outcome. However, I think the strategy needs to be the same as you are approaching an experimental study. It's like robust study design and the research question, and then think about what are the resources available, what are the infrastructure that I'll be needing to do that particular research study. So I think that's really an important thing. A lot of journals, especially the archives, now requires like a strobe statement. And I think to me, it's a really great way to really think about all these things beforehand, before even you start like, analyzing the data. And I think that way, the chances of you basically finding the right data sets and doing a really robust study will be much higher. And this is just showing some of the, just a screenshot of strobe statement. I think, the other thing is like, this is, a truly a multidisciplinary kind of, approach. And you really need multiple stakeholders actually as part of this, especially clinicians, as well as, the policy people, and as well as the methodologists, as well as people who can really, strong in terms of computation and, the analytics and things like that. So I think, that's also a very key piece. And, again, our center has been doing a lot of workshops, webinars like these, and presentations at conference. And the purpose is really kind of, facilitate research projects, using large data, both publicly available as well as data set that you need to have some kind of data use agreement and things like that. So I guess, with that, I'll probably stop here. And I think, maybe I'll still have like probably 10-15 minutes for question and answer. So like two pictures. One is on the top is the UTMB, that's the old red building. And I don't know, maybe James, you may want to explain what the bottom picture is.
Oh, that's just our common area. That's the student center,
okay.
The rec center right there. I was just trying to highlight the mountains in the background. Contrast our
All
beach
right,
and mountains.
All right. So I think with that, we'll probably just stop. This is our contact information. I mean, there is a listserv that you can sign up. So basically, we periodically send out information about the upcoming events, information about some of the other activities the center is doing. So I guess, I'll probably just stop, and then, maybe if we have questions or something like that, both James and I are happy to answer those.
Thank you so much. Do we have any questions for our speakers today? And I think everyone is muted, so just remember, if you do have a question, to unmute your line. Okay. Well, I actually will have a question, just to start us off, or it might be our only one. I know some of the students that I've worked with, they have a lot of information, that can find a lot of information on analyzing the data and kind of, I think this was very helpful, how to access these large data sets and how to kind of, like you said, integrate them with some of the more traditional small studies they have. Do y'all provide any resources for actually writing up, say, like the methodology piece? Because I think that's where some of my students have struggled, is that writing up the methods is very different than, like you said, your traditional RCT or pilot study might be. So do y'all have resources for not only how to locate and analyze the data, but actually how to present the data and the methodology as well?
Yeah, for sure. We don't necessarily have like a template, because it varies so much in terms of what the, again, if it's truly observational data or whether it's some sort of clinical data, it's just that what would you say, the primary challenges or limitations differ, but a lot of that can be either done, like Amol said, through the question and answer thing, just through the, what's the website for that, or the email address for that, Amol?
Yeah, that's just a part of the data directory, where I think, just need to submit a question that is relevant to one of the data sets, or anything that.
Okay, I thought there was like rehab@utmb.edu or something, but just for general questions that then get filtered out to someone. Again, if it's a specific question, but if it's more of a, okay, I have a blank piece of paper and I don't know what to do, then that might be more like a visiting scholar kind of thing, or just a consult. I mean, if you get on the website, there's I don't know if we're called mentors or collaborators or whatever, but there's a whole list of the, at all 5 of the consortium institutions, there's a list of people who are available. And so I don't think we've ever done an actual workshop on writing up methods, but you're right, that is a big issue. And I echo what Amol said about the strobe statement in terms of, and that's the way I was when I first started. You don't know what you don't know until you look at that. So wait, I have to account for this. So if you look at that thing ahead of time, you'll know what, again, some of it you can figure out on your own and some you can't, but that would be a good starting point on terms of, for students particularly, to say, okay, I know this, I don't even know what that is. And then that'd be a good, just question to pose to either the central, question at the CLDR, or if you've identified somebody that's in that field, or if you're citing someone, we got a long list of collaborators.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, hi. Thank you for the great presentation. My question is, so since rehabilitation science get into the secondary data game a little bit later, I feel like a lot of these secondary data collections are collected by other people are using different language than us for the definition, or the operational definition is different. Is there any resources that provide a guideline, or is there any consensus within rehabilitation science ourselves that we could have general definition for maybe participation, rehabilitation, or other functional constructs? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in first, Amol, and you can correct me. But I think part of it is changing with the common data elements, and a lot of the institutes, at least at NIH, when you get on there, on the RFAs or the PAs or whatever, when you start reading down through there's a link to the common data elements for that they endorse for their institute. But in answer, you're like, okay, but that's great moving forward. But looking back, and that's another reason why it's good to go, if you can, to the more curated data, because then you have, no matter what if you just get a data set like, oh, here's my data, and I have a physical performance measure, but I don't have the background or any citations on that, you don't know, you wouldn't even be able to replicate that. But if you go through, like, specifically the ICPSR, you have how was collected or calculated, you got the algorithm, why, citations, all that. And so you can either agree or disagree with what measure they use, but at least you have the kind of context for it. You're comparing it to another measure, or your ability to adapt it. So, Amol, do you have anything else in terms of harmony?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I would kind of say is, like, I think there is actually a window of opportunity for some of the new data sets. It's like just a request for information. I think we should really participate in that process.
Yeah.
A recent example is like the All of Us program, actually, where that window of opportunity was kind of long, where like NIH was collecting suggestion as well as feedback from research community as well as the community in general. And so basically, I was involved in that process with AOTA and some of the folks at AOTA, and just making sure, like, we provide feedback in terms of what data needs to be collected, again, targeting individuals with disabilities and things like that, because those things are relevant to the research that probably we want to do using that data for the secondary analysis and all that. So I would also suggest that's actually a really good way to really kind of make sure that at least our voices are heard, and then we participate in that process in the even before they start kind of collecting the data and all that.
Gotcha. Thank you very much.
Say, Brooke, in answer to your earlier question, someone out there stalking us on this call reminded me that the general info question thing is cldr.info@utmb.edu. I put it in the chat room down there if everyone can see it.
Okay, great.
So that's if you're, once you've worked with your students and get to the point where you know what your question is, then that would be a good place to start.
Perfect. All right, any other questions for our speakers? All right, well, I think you both did present your, you have your email addresses on the slides, and the slides will be posted to the Early Career Networking Group page within ACRM's website, so you can always access that later. Thank both of you again for agreeing to speak for us today. I think this was really helpful, especially to our early career members, and thanks everybody for joining us. So have a great weekend.
All right. Thanks, Brooks.
All right. Thank you. Bye.